Hello! Welcome! Wow, that's really loud. I don't know if you can hear me right now. Alright, that was great. That was our little musical intro. Thank you to Ron Roach. Give it up for Ron Roach.
Give it up for Ron Roach. Shout out.
Yeah, and give it up for, Cruncher, Alien Gang, and Cobys. And give it up for Teddy Toast, who's back on the show.
That's right. Back on Cobys' brain. Back at it.
Yeah, so as you know, Cobys' brain's been out of commission for a little while Sagar and I were working on a show known as the Rigel Report. Give it up for the Rigel Report. So, Sagar, good to have you back on the show. Or should I refer to you as Teddy's Toast? What do you prefer?
I go by Teddy Toast as I'm on the show, but Sagar and I share the same mind.
True.
So true. I think I can speak to his opinions here.
Yeah, it's we're still ourselves grasping around this whole concept of a podcast as digital avatars that we embody. Like, are we these avatars or are we the people? We're not really like trying to play a character here like we were in the Rigel Report.
Give it up for the Rigel Report real quick.
Oh yeah. So that actually I'll kind of get started with explaining what all that was. So basically, Sagar and I took this same exact technology here, which is this live animation done with like a digital avatar, and where we're able to do this kind of like podcasting thing that we're doing now, and we actually turned it into a show where we kind of improvised basically as these stars, which is kind of a crazy concept, but we improvised some comedy as these stars and basically acted as different characters and kind of in a similar setting that we have now, and it was pretty cool. Did I capture that pretty well, Sagar, or do you have any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that was beautiful. I think the main idea here is that we can build this set, we can build these characters once, and once we've actually done that, we can use the same assets, we can use the same build to make as many shows as we want. So for example, for every other episode that I, Teddy Toast, get to be on with Cobys' brain, we can use the exact same tech and we can start building on top of that. So, it actually frees us up to just have a genuine conversation rather than worrying about sort of wrangling with different tools or, bringing in a whole crew to help actors get set up. It's super, super easy and it's super low tech. We're running this off of our laptops right now.
Teddy's Toast, you still there?
We are still here, Cobys' brain.
Great. That is excellent. So, where were we? Where were we before that fiasco took place?
Yeah, so I think the last thing we were talking about was this idea of basically being able to build once and then shoot as many episodes as possible using the exact same tech, the exact same assets. So actually, actors have a chance to focus a lot more on their performance, or in our case, the conversation, rather than us fiddling with tech and just having a really hard time getting that all set up.
Yeah, totally. It's pretty, honestly, like revolutionary, like how quickly we were able to make the show using the build that you kind of created. What was all the tech that was necessary to make something like this?
Yeah, so I think the foundations were actually this idea of having a networked scene. So it kind of operates like a multiplayer game where you're in the same virtual space with another person or a bunch of other people, and you can hear each other talk, you can mute, you can unmute. So what we built was almost like the animated equivalent or an animation show equivalent of Zoom, where people can almost dial into the same scene and act out, different things together or talk to each other. And that was kind of the format of the Rigel Report. I think also another really important component there was the art. So Brenda Chen was our art director, and she put together all the sets.
Give it
She
up
put
for
together the
Brenda.
characters. Give it up for Brenda. She's been on Cobys' brain as well, in the form of Gummy Worman. Um, but she's not here with us today. But ultimately, a lot of her work was what kind of informed the look of the Rigel report, the style, and that's ultimately what people see on screen. So part of it was the sort of foundational tech of just getting people into the same virtual room and getting them to act through their virtual characters. And the other component was the art, which is what people or our viewers get to see. So I think both of those things were super critical before we could actually start making episodes of the show.
Yeah, yeah. So that was interesting. As great as the art is on Cobys' brain, the art on the Rigel report was definitely an upgrade. We had a lot of like visual effects thanks to Yimin, Yimin Zhang. Give it up for Yimin.
Give it up for Yemen.
We'll do that again. 2 rounds of applause. But yeah, but thanks to Yimin and Brenda, like so Sagar kind of had the underlying tech, and Yimin and Brenda kind of made like Cobys' brain was done by me, and that kind of shows. But with Yimin and Brenda, like they're actually like really good artists and made pretty incredible characters. So I think Rigel Report was a really good example of like the potential that this has. But I think where it gets really interesting, Sagar, is in thinking about what, like how, because I mean, again, but even though the art was a lot better in the Rigel Report, the functionality was still pretty limited in terms of this multiplayer scene where you can enter and you can talk and you can take your mouse and you can move your character's like vision. But do you think theoretically this kind of this multiplayer game approach has the potential to really make anything, or do you think there are limits to it as to what it can do? You know what I mean?
Yeah, Cobys' brain. That's a really good point. I think what's important to keep in mind with the Rigel report is that we wanted to make it super easy for actors all over the country to dial into the same room. So we actually very intentionally set out to make sure that all of our tech worked on laptops. Whereas another step we could have taken, or another direction we could have gone in, is making our characters work with VR headsets or work with motion capture suits or with iPhone facial capture technology that's actually operating a part of this show. I think to that end, we could have characters that are super complex, that look really realistic, that are more expressive. And I think it's a matter of just adding a little bit more to the preparation of each episode. So I think to your point, the Rigel report was a really great example of us doing this in a really fast, low tech way. But it's a kind of proof of concept for what this could look like if we were to add additional tech to that stack. So if we were to add, VR headsets for more immersion from the actor's perspective, or motion capture to actually capture body movement and facial capture to give our characters a little bit more of an expressive look, I feel like all of those things could actually get us a little bit closer to what people generally recognize as like, Pixar or Disney level animated characters. So I think that's kind of the North Star of productions like this.
That is the North Star. Yeah, I agree. But are there limitations you think to this approach that that because in my mind once you get into VR and you put enough time into the preparation, it seems like there's really nothing you can't do with these multi-user applications. But in the short term, obviously the limitations have to do with the computing power of the devices and like and just the limitations of rendering in real time, and like how much data you can transfer instantaneously over the network. Like what other kinds of things can you think of?
Yeah, actually, technical constraints that you brought up are really good to mention. I think we still haven't hit the bounds of that on the Rigel report or on Cobys brain, but certainly we have in terms of just the level of quality we see in the art. So I think on the other end, so there are technical constraints, and then on the other end of the spectrum, there's polish or finesse that animators usually bring to their characters or the sets that they build out. And I think when you watch like a Pixar movie or you watch a Disney movie, a lot of the storytelling is sort of told through, the finesse that animators actually bring to the scene. So, frame by frame, people are actually working really hard to figure out how a character looks, how it moves, how it behaves. And that actually adds a little bit of a little bit more of a higher quality feel to the thing that people are watching on screen. And I think that's actually what's missing in a lot of real time productions. It's really hard to be able to do that on the fly and to really polish all the little things like, a character's movement or the lighting in a scene. There's some of those things that can be done in real time, but ultimately, when it comes to art direction, when it comes to the finesse that people can bring to sort of asynchronous productions, I think there's still a gap in how we do that right now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So I think there are some things missing, but I think it's important to note like the advantages that this brings besides just saving time, which is the fact that theoretically, um, the performance can be more uh, you know compelling because the actors are you know in an animated space with each other. Like what how valuable
Yeah,
do you think that
you can
is?
like improv.
Yeah, you can improv. Like that's what we do
Yeah, I think
with
to
the
to your
Rigel report.
point, exactly. Like we were able to riff off of one another, and we were able to come up with dialogue on the spot, um, rather than us just like sitting in. Actually, for Kobe's Brain's audience, I think it's actually worth running through what this looks like in a traditional animated production. So if we were voice actors, we would go into the booth and we would try to deliver our lines to the best of our ability without actually seeing our characters in real time. And then someone would go off, edit our audio, and then that audio clip would be handed off to an animator, and that animator would basically have to slave away to make sure that whatever they're animating aligns with the voice clip. Whereas with the Rigel report, what we were able to do is actually riff in person. We were able to sort of improv with one another, workshop our lines as we're seeing our characters deliver them, and all of that was happening at the same time. Like an animator didn't have to go off and then spend several hours or days basically animating on top of our audio. All of that was happening at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And that made it that as a result of that, with the Rigel report, we were able to make in 6 weeks of shoot. Obviously, a lot of time into preparing the build and getting the scene ready, but we were able to make 6 episodes in 6 weeks, which is that's like for a production team of like just a few people. It was me,
Yeah, I
Saw.
mean it's unheard of.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty crazy. So we're obviously super proud of that. But reflecting upon the Rigel report, like what were some other key takeaways that you got from that experience, Teddy Toast?
Yeah, so Kobe's Brain. I think what was interesting about that production was that we did a lot of the planning that allowed us to have peace of mind when we were actually in production. So once we had the build set, we had the art finalized. We didn't have to worry about that every week. I think Kobe definitely had to jump in and do a lot of work with post production to make sure that our 30 minutes of footage that we would shoot could be edited down to a 5-minute episode. So props to Kobe if we get a round of applause. And aside from that, I feel like there was we learned a lot about, I think, the intricacies of making sure that each episode is really well planned out so that when we do go into a shoot, we're spending our time really wisely. So, Kobe came in with a really solid production plan around, the bits that we would do as characters, the segments that we would want to sort of improvise on top of. And it's kind of the producer's role to bring in guests and make sure that all of that is sort of set up. So I think as much as we want to believe that a lot of this work is being done in real time, I think it's important to note that there's also a lot of preparation that goes into it ahead of time that allows us to basically have a real-time production that really works.
Yeah, totally, totally. And I mean, for me, there were a lot of takeaways as well. Just in terms of, uh, you know, like how we could take, real, like, just in terms of like the process of I feel like making a show where, I feel like it was interesting. I feel like overall, I don't know if you would agree, but I feel like our performance really continually improved over the course of the show, just because that was something that was unique, was just the fact that we were able to really just like enter and become our characters. And
Absolutely. I mean, we were able to embody our characters. We were able to understand, how, in my case, or in Sagar's case, how Sirius would react to certain things, or how Rigel would behave. And we were able to sort of build bits around that. We were able to become our characters through the process of just seeing them, react to what we were saying in real time.
totally, totally. And that helped. That makes me think of, what performances are going to be like once, if theoretically what we were talking about earlier comes into fruition, and you get professional actors who get hired on, like, a high budget CG, like, animated, film, and they are just acting with one another as those characters. It's gonna, I guess, put a lot of power in their hands as to what their performances are gonna look like. It's gonna kind of usher in a whole new era of, theoretically, all of this is all theoretical, but like of the actor actually really dictating what their performance as an animated character is gonna be like. Because we did have a variety of inputs that Sagar was able to program, like, that allowed us to give our character personality ourselves, besides just voice. Like, I mean, the fact that the characters could turn and, look around. Yeah, what would be some other features that you think we could potentially program into something like this?
I mean, that's a really good point. I think the idea of actors expanding beyond just lending their likeness into actually being able to control their characters to some extent is a really important point that I think is worth discussing. So kind of a thought experiment here is, right now when actors jump into a live action shoot, what they're doing is essentially acting in front of the screen, and they're basically bound by, their costumes, their likeness, the way that they can express themselves physically. Whereas, at some point in the future, if these animators are able to, or if these actors are able to control an animated character, and they're able to control multiple features, right? So it's almost like Benedict Cumberbatch being able to control Smog and all of his different features, of the dragon specifically. What would that look like for actors in the future who are controlling non-humanoid characters? I think it's just interesting to think about, because it sort of goes beyond just, the actor's movement or their facial capture. Maybe there are other inputs that the actors can use that, they're already using for their delivery that can actually influence different parts of a character in the future, depending on, what the show actually looks like.
But the question kind of emerges there is, like, is that power that you even want to give to the actors, as opposed to keeping it in the hands of the animators who, are trained to, know exactly how to, make a compelling visual performance? Like, is that something that we want
I
in the
think
hands
it's
of the actors?
Yeah, so I think that's actually pretty interesting to think about. I think from the actor's perspective, it's in their interest to bring as much life to the character as possible. And I think a lot of it just comes down to how comfortable actors are at sort of going above and beyond, beyond just like delivering their voice, but also, maybe even jumping into a motion capture suit to act out what a line might look like, or figure out what that character might look like virtually. But then ultimately, I think I agree with you here. It's up to the animator to sort of see how that performance actually fits into the larger narrative, pushes the story forward depending on what the story is. Because, in traditional productions right now, ultimately there is a lot of editing that happens between the actors delivering their lines and those lines showing up in the final movie. I know there's like a famous bit from Coco where, one line that one of the characters said is actually a combination of like 18 different performances that were all strung together. So that kind of stuff can't happen in real time, right? So ultimately, I do think that there's a lot of value in still applying that level of finesse and polish that animators bring to their work.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But that being said, though, I think there are a lot of major differences between film and television, and like the level of finesse that goes into a feature film versus the level of finesse that goes into an episode of television. And so for me, considering how quick it would be to give that power to the actor, so that the actor can just give a performance that they're happy with, and that the whoever is directing it, and then we just have rapid content, so it's an interesting question. It's the kind of thing that I somehow, I probably wouldn't recommend that approach for like a Pixar film. I don't know what you think about that, but for a TV show, I feel like for a TV show, this is the way to go. At least I kind of feel that way.
Actually, what's interesting, like even for animated shows, when actors are delivering their lines in a booth, there's usually some video that accompanies it, because ultimately the actors make certain faces that might inform the animation, or they move in a certain way that informs the final piece. And I think that if we were to think of all of the other types of capture that we can also implement, like motion capture or facial capture, what if we actually thought about them as additional reference, right? So in the case of TV, maybe that's actually a good starting point to have the actor's facial capture then remapped onto a character. So then, to your point, in TV, if we don't have as much time to polish, maybe we can still build on top of that. But if we do, then we still have better reference from the actor that's actually captured, either from their face through facial capture or through their body movements, if they're in a motion capture suit. So I think even seeing it in that way actually gives the animators a little bit more, reference material to actually work with and build on top of.
Yeah, and something we were actually talking about doing for the Rigel report, or that we were considering that, it probably would have been a bit of a hassle, was to actually, because what we're doing now is we're taking this 3D scene and we're screen capturing it, right? And that is the content that we are delivering, whereas it is theoretically possible to just take that 3D scene, and once this was recorded, the whole scene is just one giant, 3D model, like one giant FBX, that the animators can then go in and they can actually modify and reshoot, but the performance is still in there. But if there's certain things that require finesse, then that can be done kind of later. I mean, what do you think?
That's a really good point. Yeah, I feel like actually there are kind of two paths to this, right? One is two paths to a real-time production specifically. One is doing all of the work ahead of time to make sure that during the shoot, all you need to do is just shoot what's on screen. The other approach, I think, is to set up your scene almost like a system, just like you're saying, where the output is actually an asset that is finessable, where, we're able to have like a master timeline with all of the animation and performance all there. And after the fact, animators can go in or editors can go in to make sure that they're just picking the best take. So they're able to edit the performance to make sure that it sort of hits on the story that they want to hit. And, ultimately, artists are perfectionists to an extent. I feel like the reason that animators enjoy actually spending time frame by frame, making sure that a shot really works, is because that's the beauty that they actually bring to the craft. And there's a lot of value in being able to give animators the tools or give editors the tools to go in after the shoot and make sure that the performance of different actors actually aligns with the story they're trying to tell.
I think that's I think that's super interesting actually. That really right there, all the preparation that goes into creating a build like that, but then being able to take the output of that build and actually use it and finesse it. That's a kind of a great pipeline right there.
Yeah, I mean, Cobys' brain. You can definitely speak to Cobys' opinions here because I feel like going in after the edit, it actually takes a certain level of artistry to be able to pick out the best shots and to be able to go back and say, here's all of this footage that we got, but here are the best pieces that actually make sense to fit in an episode.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that kind of creative control is it's almost a requirement when it comes to productions like this. Usually, other than long form podcasts like the one, that we're shooting right now, I feel like artists actually do want that control.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think for something to be, I mean, obviously to be feature length, you need a lot of control of that, like of what you ended up shooting. You need a lot of control, just because that's just the level of quality that people expect to see out of movies, and honestly, probably with TV shows too. Like the Rigel Report was great as a web series, but is it something that I would expect Netflix to pick up? I don't think so. Just because there probably isn't enough there's a lot it's just missing a lot of the finesse, of a character going and doing something unconventional, that we don't just see all the time. But
Yeah, that's right. Because even for animated series episodes that are on Netflix, it does feel like there is a certain level of quality that's achieved, from an asynchronous production that just isn't there with real time yet. I think we're slowly getting to that point, and I think ultimately, I feel like one good takeaway from all of this is that the artistry and the storytelling still really matters, regardless of the tech, regardless of the production methods. I feel like ultimately the winners will end up being the really solid storytellers or the really solid artists who are able to bring that artistry to life.
I think
And
that's totally
actually,
true. Continue.
yeah, I mean, one other thing that I was thinking about as we were talking was that the Rigel Report production combined the best parts of live action and the best parts of animation. Because in the case of animation, in a traditional production, you're basically storyboarding everything from the very beginning. Animators aren't necessarily doing multiple shots just for the sake of coverage. If they have a shot, then they're doing that shot however long it takes. And in live action, coverage is really important, making sure that people get a bunch of takes, making sure that, the editors can go back and pull different pieces of footage after the fact. Basically both of those techniques were combined with the Rigel Report production, and I think that's actually really special and something that we hopefully see a little bit more of in the future.
Totally. Well, Teddy's Toast, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure to have you. Give it up for Teddy Toast.
Thanks, Cobys' brain. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to hopefully be back in the future.
Oh, I'm pretty sure he'll be back next week, but I won't give that away to any of our excited viewers, of which there are currently 0. But thank you for watching. That's our show, and we'll see you next time on Cobys' Brain.